there, welcome to another lecture of digital signal processing. So in this lecture we will study about the sampling of continuous time signals. So let's start. So discrete time signals can arise in many ways. So basically digital signal processing is all about discrete signals. Okay, but what is the source of these discrete signals, you might be wondering. Okay, because the real life signals are continuous time signals. Okay, so discrete time signals can arise in many ways, but the most common way is by sampling of continuous time signals. Okay, so if we want to understand, or if we want to draw a block diagram how a discrete time signal gets processed, it can be like this. So we have a continuous time signal referred as CT signal. We do the sampling. Then this is a discrete time signal. After this we can do some discrete time processing. After this we do the reconstruction. To convert discrete time to continuous time, and then finally we get the continuous time signal. So this is a kind of a very high level overview how in today's system continuous time signals are processed. Okay, so again this is a very high level overview. Okay, so as we mentioned that real life signals are continuous time. Okay, for example, audio signal or a speech signal, let's say. So okay, so let's take an example that whatever we are speaking, this is a speech signal and it is a continuous time signal. Okay, and if we want to process it, let's say we want to filter it, we want to remove some particular frequency, and we want to get the rest of the signal. So we can implement our filter in discrete time to process discrete time signals. So for that this will be our speech signal. We will sample it, we will get discrete time signal. This will be a filter, either could be low pass, band pass or high pass, depends on what application we need. And after that, after filtering, we will reconstruct the signal to get the continuous time signal. Okay, so basically the sampling is used, the idea is that the sampling is used to convert a continuous time signal to a discrete time signal. Okay, but again another question comes that still why we cannot process a continuous time signal? Why for processing we need a digital signal, or a discrete time signal? Okay, so the one answer could be that for example a computer or a processor, it can process a finite number of samples. Finite number of samples. Okay, what do we mean by it? So you might have heard that this processor is of these number of bits. So for example, this processor can represent numbers in 32 bits or 64 bits. Okay, so let's draw a continuous time signal. It usually looks something like this. Okay, so these are, for storing a signal in a computer, we have to store all these signal. So when we are representing this, if we look in the time domain, these are infinite number of samples. How many samples, how many numbers will you save? So we can say that we will save something like this. We can save something like this. We can save samples with some spacing. Okay, we can save actually these samples, and then after that we will recover it, or we will reconstruct it. So basically this process is nothing but sampling. Okay, so to represent our continuous time signal in discrete time representation, sampling is used. Okay, but in industry, uh, they use ADC or analog to digital converter, for which implements the sampling process. Okay, so this analog to digital converter actually samples the signal in both time axis as well as the amplitude axis. Okay, so as I mentioned that a computer can store a number in a particular number of bits, for example 32 bit or 64 bit, so that is the amplitude. For example, this number, let's say some x, this can be represented in some 32 bit format or some number of, okay. So basically, if you want to understand, the sampling is happening in both time axis as well as the amplitude axis, so that is done by ADC or analog to digital converter. Okay, so in this we will talk about the periodic sampling. Okay, that means it will be represented something like this. So where xn is our discrete time signal and xc is our continuous time signal. Okay, so initially this xc is something like this. After sampling, we can write it like this. Okay, where this capital T is the sampling period, and fs, which is equals to 1 upon t, is sampling frequency. Okay, so this is represented in hertz, or if you want to represent it in radian per second, it is 2 pi by t, or represented usually by capital omega s. This is in radians per second. Okay, fine. So sampling operation is generally not invertible. Given the output, it is not possible to reconstruct the input continuous time signal in general, but using some DSP techniques, it is possible to reconstruct a close approximation of the continuous time signal. Fine. Yeah, so now let's understand how sampling is done. Okay, so basically sampling is done by multiplying our input signal or the continuous time signal by an impulse train. Okay, so if this is our input signal or the continuous time signal, it can be multiplied. This is multiplied by an impulse train, okay, and then there is a conversion from impulse train to discrete time sequence. Okay, and this is the discrete time signal. Cool. So for example, if this is a continuous time signal, let's say, okay, so I want to show you an example where we sample a continuous time signal with different sampling periods. So let's sample this with some basically let's multiply. I will not say let's sample this, so we will just follow this. We have, so this green signal is xct, and these black impulse train, this black signal is the impulse train, and this is the multiplication. Okay, fine. And let's say that the period of this impulse train is capital T, which is equals to, let's say, t1. Fine. This is green signal is our XCT and this black is the impulse train. Cool. And now let's assume that on the second signal we multiply by impulse train with period equals to 2 times of t1. Okay, so it will look something like this. So here the spacing will be more when we compare it with the first signal. Okay, here the spacing will be more, and if you want to mark them, it will be, let's say, 0, capital T, 2t, 3t, minus t, minus 2t, and so on. And here it will be 0, capital T, 2t, 3t, minus t, minus 2t. Fine. So you might have observed that on the time axis the numbers are same. The numbers are in the form of capital T. Okay, so this will be more clear as we draw the discrete time sequence now. Okay, so the discrete time sequence, basically it will be exactly similar except one difference. Okay, so these are the samples. Okay, so now when we convert them to a discrete time sequence, the numbers on the time axis are indexed on integer variable. Okay, so this will be 0, 1, 2, 3, 1, minus 2, minus 3. Okay, so this is like this, and similarly on this hand, on this signal also, when we draw them, these numbers will be 0, 1, 2, minus 1, minus 2, and so on. Okay, so the xn is indexed on integer variables. Yeah, listen this point. This is an important one. The xn is indexed on integer variables. That means that it represents time normalization. Yeah, so now let's dig into some mathematics and try to understand frequency domain representation of sampling. Okay, so after the multiplication of impulse train, let's assume that signal is xst and impulse train, yeah, so xst, we can write it like xct multiplied by an impulse train. Okay, and let's assume that this impulse train is represented by a signal s of t. Okay, so by using the shifting property of impulse function, we can write this signal as like this. Okay, so taking the Fourier transform of this function, it will be like this. Okay, where omega s, we already know, is a radian per second frequency, and it is this. Okay, so xs of j omega can be written like 1 upon ts summation over k from minus infinity to plus infinity xc. Okay, so this is all about the mathematics, but what this equation is telling us, that is the more important thing to understand. Okay, so this basically is representing the relation between input continuous signal and output discrete time signal. Input continuous time signal and output discrete time signal. Point 1. Second, we know that xs or the discrete time sequence contains periodically repeated copies of xc, periodically repeated copies of xc. Point 2. Point 3, all those copies are shifted by an integer multiple of omega s. And finally, those are all superimposed to produce excess of j omega. Okay. Yeah, so let's again look back these points on this equation. This is the relation between input continuous time signal and output discrete time sequence. These are this contains periodically repeated copies of xc. Okay, we see here, and these are shifted by k omega s. Okay, which is represented by this argument, and all these are superimposed, which is represented by this summation, to get finally xs. Okay, so let's understand this equation by taking an example and drawing pictorial representation of a frequency domain signal. Okay. So to understand the sampling in frequency domain better, let's take an example of a band limited signal. Okay, remember this. Let's take an example of a band limited signal. Okay, talking of the frequency axis, let's take the numbers in terms of hertz instead of radian per second. So this is the frequency axis. Let's take this as fn minus fn, and this is our xc of f. Cool. This is a band limited signal, so that's why in frequency domain it is limited. After some numbers, after some frequency, it is 0. So that those numbers are plus fn and minus fn. Okay, and how this is how our the continuous time signal looks like, and how the impulse train will look like. It will be like this. Okay, s of f. Okay, this will be fs, 2fs, 0, minus fs, minus 2fs, and so on, where fs we know is equals to 1 upon ts, which is the sampling duration. Okay, so if we draw xs j omega here, or xs of f after multiplication, so remember one thing, that those multiplication by an impulse train of the multiplication between continuous time signal and impulse train was in time domain, and here we are talking of in frequency domain. So here it will be convolution. Okay, so I'll just draw the final signal, the final sampled signal, how that final sampled signal looks in frequency domain. Okay, so it will be like convolution, and you know, when we convolve a signal with an impulse function, it just shifts, the signal just shifts to that impulse position. Okay, and here as we see that the impulse is periodic, so again the shifting will also be at every period. Fine, so it will look something like this, and so on, similarly on the negative frequency side. Cool. Excess of f. And now the most important thing is, now let's understand what these frequency numbers will be. Okay, so the first will be at 0. This will be omega n, this will be minus omega n. The second, this center will shift to fs. I beg your pardon. We are talking in terms of linear frequency or the hertz frequency, so this will be f n and minus fn. Okay, so this particular copy will also be shifted to fs. Okay, so this will be fs minus fn, and this will be fs plus fn. Okay. Similarly, this will be minus fs, this will be minus 2fs, this will be 2fs, and so on, every k of fs. Fine. So here, if you look on this part, basically, you see that these two copies will not overlap with each other if, only if fs minus fn, which is this number, is greater than or equal to f of n. In this case, these two copies will not overlap, and we can actually reconstruct our initial signal from the sampled signal. Okay, so for proper reconstruction, we should have fs minus fn greater than or equals to capital Fn, or fs greater than equals to 2fn. Okay, for proper reconstruction, the sampling frequency should be greater than equals to 2 times of fn, or 2 times of maximum frequency content of a band limited signal. How this comes? Again, this comes from this. This number is fs minus fn, this number is fn, so fs minus fn should be greater than equals to fn. Okay, this is nothing but Nyquist sampling theorem. Okay, here fs fn is known as Nyquist frequency, and 2fn is Nyquist rate, and we know that fs is our sampling frequency. Okay, so the most important thing is this is the Nyquist sampling theorem. Now let's take a case where fs is less than 2fn. Okay, because that is also a possibility. Okay, so again let's draw our initial xcf like this. This is minus fn, this is plus fn, and now let's assume that fs is less than 2fn. Okay, so in that case, fs minus fn should be less than fn. Okay, so basically what will happen in that case? This is our unshifted signal or copy, and the next one will be this. Okay, on the left side also this will be this. The case how? This is 0, this is fn, this is fs, and this will be fs minus fn, and fs minus fn is less than fn because of this condition, fs less than 2fn. Okay, similarly, if you extrapolate this to the negative frequency axis, the left copy will also overlap with the unshifted copy. Okay, so because of not following the Nyquist sampling theorem or fs less than 2fn, there is overlap between the different copies. This overlap condition is known as aliasing. Okay, this is known as aliasing. So basically in this case, because of the aliasing, the higher frequency component suffers. or there is an overlap between different copies. And this obviously hinders in proper reconstruction of the signal. Okay, make sense? Yeah, so now let's understand that how do we actually recover, how reconstruction happens. Okay, so I'll just draw a non-aliased version, or the case where fs is greater than 2fn. Okay, this is an unshifted copy and these are the other copies, like this. Okay, and so on. This is 0, fn minus fn, this will be 2fs, sorry, this will be fs, fs minus fn, fs plus fn, and so on. So to reconstruct it, we basically put a low pass filter on this, low pass filter with cutoff frequency of fs by 2. So that will fall somewhere here, or basically that will be more than or equal to fn, because we had fs greater than equals to 2fn, so fs by 2 will be greater than equals to fn. Okay, so by putting a low pass filter we can actually recover this copy, and this will be our reconstructed signal. This is a low pass filter, commonly known as LPF. So by passing this signal through our low pass filter, we can actually reconstruct our signal. Okay, so now let's take an example that what is the effect of aliasing in the sampling of a cosine signal. Okay, effect of aliasing in the sampling of cosine signal. Okay, so let's assume that we have a sinusoidal or cosine signal of 10 megahertz. Okay, so how on frequency axis it will look? One impulse at plus 10, another impulse at minus 10. Okay, and let's assume that we are sampling it by 15 megahertz. Okay, so how will we determine whether aliasing will happen or not? Let's again look back our equation. Fs greater than equals to 2fn, fn is 10 megahertz. Okay, right? So fs should be greater than equals to 20 megahertz, but here our fs is 15 megahertz. So fs is actually less than 2fn here. So that means in this case there will be aliasing. But how the signal will look like? After we do the sampling, this unshifted copy will shift to 15 megahertz first. So this point will shift to somewhere here, which is 15 megahertz. This point will shift somewhere here, which is minus 15 megahertz. Okay, so 0 plus 10 will go to 25. 0 minus 10 will go to 15 minus 10, 5 megahertz. Yeah, so this minus 10 will go to 15 minus 10, 5 megahertz. Similarly, here this minus 10 will shift to minus 15 minus minus 10, which is minus 5. Okay, and so on. Fine. So after placing the low pass filter at 15/2, that is 7.5 megahertz, the reconstructed signal will be these two impulses, one at -5, another at +5. So it, instead of recovering a signal or sinusoidal signal of 10 megahertz, the recovered is 5 megahertz. Okay, so this shows the effect of aliasing on the sampling. Okay, so is there a way to mitigate the aliasing? There is actually one way. So before doing the sampling, we can actually do the low pass filtering. So for example, we know that this is our signal, -fn plus fn. Okay, we can actually low pass filter it, where the low pass filter cutoff frequency is fs/2. Okay, something like, okay, this -fs/2 plus fs/2. We can low pass filter it, so the final signal will be something like this. Okay, so in this case there will be no aliasing because fn is equals to fs/2 here. Okay, cool. Yeah, so the final thing is, let's try to represent this x. Let's try to represent this xs of j omega or xs of f in terms of x of e j omega, because we are familiar with x of e j omega in our DSP, as we have studied that in previous lectures also, so we are familiar with that. So let's try to convert this to our digital frequency, basically the small omega. Okay, in this term. Okay, so we know, we are familiar with this equation. Okay, this is after multiplication with impulse train, taking the Fourier transform of this. The signal is this capital omega summation over n xc of n t e to the power minus j n ts omega. Okay, xn is equals to xc of nt. Okay, the discrete time sequence, xs of j omega is equals to, it can also be written like this, where small omega is equals to capital omega times ts. This is also ts. Okay, or basically it can also be written like okay. So finally x of e j omega is equals to 1 upon t summation over k minus infinity to infinity xc j omega by t minus 2 pi k by t. Okay, okay, so what this equation actually means? So the point is that there is actually a scaling happens when we convert from hertz or radian per second to our digital frequency, which is in radian. So the scaling is small omega is equals to capital omega times ts. Okay, again, what is the meaning of this? Point 1 is this x of e j omega is simply a frequency scaled version of x c j omega with frequency scaling this understood. Okay, so yeah, So when we talk about the frequency, the Fourier transform of discrete time signal, we talk about basically DTFT. Okay, and how we draw DTFT is something like this, and okay, and how we mark the frequency is in terms of angles, 0, pi, 2 pi, minus 2 pi, and so on. Okay, but till now we have seen that when we are while talking of continuous time signal, basically, which is this xc, we draw the signals and we mark our frequency in terms of capital omega s, minus omega s, and so on. Okay, so is there a way to convert this particular frequency values to this particular frequency values? Because if we find xc of j omega, the sampled version, we can actually find this signal also only by a frequency scaling. So yes, there is a relation. We can convert this frequency axis to this frequency axis by this relation. Or as we know, if we know the frequency in radian per second, we can know the frequency in radian, or we can know the frequency in radian, which is this, by this relation. I beg your pardon. Okay. So the sampling frequency is this. So in terms of our digital frequency, omega s, that will be multiply ts. So this implies this will be this. So when we talk of continuous time signal or the frequency in hertz, we usually say that this is our fs. Okay, and while we talk of DTFT, we will say, or we will just translate the signal, and we will say that instead of fs, it is 2 pi. Instead of minus fs, it is minus 2 pi. Okay, so you might have observed this while we were studying in the previous lecture, while we were talking of DTFT also, that there the signal, the DTFT is continuous in frequency domain, but it is periodic with period, with period 2 pi. So this is the reason behind that. Okay, so if we draw, let's say, a signal again to be more clarified, to be more clear, this is our signal, 0, 2 pi, sorry, 0, fs, minus fs. In digital frequency or small omega s, it will be 2 pi, it will be minus 2 pi. Okay, cool.